Hi, welcome to the Year of She podcast. This episode is titled Grief and Grace, a Mother's Story. I'm Sherry Gilbert Ramsey, your host.
And I'm Dr. Nicole Brown, your co-host.
And again, welcome to the Year of She podcast. Today's guest that we have today is Dr. Kimberly Hill. And we are just so glad to have her on today's podcast session. I will let her introduce herself and tell you a little bit about her story.
Thank you. I am so honored to be here, and just this is my first real foray into just kind of opening myself up and sharing my journey. Kimberly Hill, I'm a single mother of three, live in Knoxville, Tennessee. I'm 54 years old. And I think that I have a very interesting story, both as a mother, as a daughter, and dealing with loss.
Okay, Kimberly, tell us a little bit about your loss and what did that loss do for you? What did it do for you as far as changing your life?
Can I back up and start before the loss to kind of explain how we got there?
Yes, definitely. Let's start from the beginning.
So my life with my mother has been very tumultuous. I was kicked out of high school at 17 or 16. And so therefore I was kicked out of the house at 16. And even though I'm from Knoxville, Tennessee, I found myself in Atlanta, Georgia, going to Job Corps. Did not have my high school diploma, even though I was on a college track in high school. I found myself no education, no job, just kind of hopeless in Atlanta, in the Job Corps program. And so that experience was tumultuous, but I got on track after going to Job Corps because they enabled me to get my GED. They sent me to first Atlanta Metropolitan College and then on to Morris Brown College. And it kind of looked like life was going to be okay until I got pregnant. And having very little experience about having conversations, with my mother or with my family about, prevention and how to overcome that. I just kind of ignored it. I knew I was pregnant, but I just ignored it. And Job Corps told me that I could stay there until I started to show. But once I started to show, I had to leave. And I could still be a participant and they would still pay for me to go to school, but I couldn't live on campus due to liability. So ignoring it, immaturity, frontal lobe not finished being developed. I just ignored it like it was going to go away. And one day, my counselor came in and said, Kim, we let you stay a little longer than we would have normally allowed anybody to stay, but you can't stay here anymore. And I was shocked. Even though I knew it was coming, I just was shocked. And so they basically told me I had 24 hours to leave. I called my mom to see if I could come home, and she was like, no, you're pregnant. You didn't want to follow my rules. You didn't do well in school. You can't come home. So there I was. I found myself, 5, almost 6 months pregnant, homeless in Atlanta. And I worked at Greenbrier Mall, and I had some really supportive people that I worked with. Some I'm still very close to this day. But I would ask them, well, can I stay with, you? And they were like, well, you can stay here for a couple of days, but, you can't live here. So I just kind of found myself wandering around the city of Atlanta without a lot of life experience. Because, again, I'm from Knoxville, Tennessee. It's a populated rural area. The biggest industry we have here is the University of Tennessee. So I'm wandering around Atlanta, but this is what I learned through that experience. I learned that you can learn from anybody because I learned how to be homeless. So just being out you run into all sorts of people with good intentions, people with bad intentions, people with addictions, with mental health issues. But I always felt like there was my steps were ordered even in that, because I met an older lady who looked as put together as you two ladies look today. And she was homeless, and you would have never known she was homeless. But I met her at the MARTA station in downtown Atlanta, and she just kind of took to me and told me, look, if you're going to be out here on the street, you need to go get you a Y membership. It's like, what? And this is being a green teenager. A Y membership, why do I need a Y membership? Yeah, I'm not going to be working out. Yeah, I'm not going to be going to the gym. And she said, no, honey, it's so you can keep yourself together. She said, because if you look homeless and you look like you don't belong, people would treat you that way. If you're clean and put together and neat, no one will ever suspect you're homeless, and they won't treat you as homeless. And so that was a lesson that was very valuable to me, because she was right. I never got ran off from another place after that. Another thing that I learned through that experience, I worked at the mall, and I would go as soon as the doors would open. Would try to get my homework done, but eventually I couldn't do that and ended up dropping out of school. But there was this man from India that, just saw me coming in early and leaving out late. And he owned a little kiosk in the mall, and his wife ran a restaurant at the food court. And I would just talk to him every day, because he was always early and always late leaving too. And I told him, my situation, just being a kid thinking I'm going to tell an adult and they're going to help me. I didn't necessarily get financial help or even resource help, but I got a lot of life lessons that I carry with me to this day. That man from India told me, he said, you will be okay. It didn't feel like it. I felt like I didn't know what tomorrow would look like. But this man, he said, you'll be okay. He said, it'll be hard. He said, but you're young. And when you're young, you have the energy to go through these hard times. And you're going to gain some wisdom from it. And you're going to learn a lot about people. You're going to learn a lot about human nature. And when you're older, you will be able to reflect on this time and be thankful for the experience. I never thought that would be true. Who would be thankful for being homeless? But he was right. I learned a lot about human nature. I learned a lot about listening to my gut. And I actually learned a lot about forgiveness, because I had to forgive some adults for allowing me to be in that situation. And I had to forgive myself for allowing myself to be in that situation. So to make a long story short, I survived that experience. Did not go back to Morris Brown College. My mother eventually allowed me to come home, but that tension that was created throughout that whole experience has been a undercurrent in my story, which became a undercurrent in the story with my daughter. And that's why I wanted to kind of share that. So I came home. I had my daughter, not my daughter that passed away, but my oldest daughter. And I went back to school, and I actually finished. I was really surprised, but the words that man had said to me, he said a lot of wise things, but those words played in my head a lot. The words of my grandmother telling me I was smart, it played in my head a lot. So the tapes that were created as a young woman with that homeless experience got me through the hard times to finish college. So but there was still a lot of tension between my mother and I, even as adult women, So we evolved from the teenage and parent stressors to the young adult with a child and parent stressors. And just basically that experience made me feel like, I just couldn't do anything right. I couldn't be a mother, a good mother. I couldn't, and that experience followed me into adulthood and into a mother and my children. So by the time I was 24, I had graduated from college, had another daughter, and this is the daughter that passed away. And those doing what you see and not what you necessarily feel is best is kind of how I raised my children. I try to do with them as it was done for me, to have a hard stance. And, I wasn't a real warm, fuzzy mom because I didn't have a real warm, fuzzy mom. And I parented as I was parented. So as my daughters got older, um, I did not pay close attention to, in hindsight, I did not pay as close attention to their emotional and mental health as I should have. Um, I don't beat myself up for it anymore because when you know better, you do better. But at that time, I wanted them to do well in school. I wanted them to stay in school. I wanted them to graduate. I wanted them to grow up to be successful women. And I think my focus was on that. And I raised a very responsible daughter, two daughters actually, very responsible. But there was a disconnect with me and my daughters, just as there was a disconnect with me and my mother. And so some signs were missed with my daughter that passed away. She was a very quiet, introverted, to herself type of a young lady. And because she wasn't complaining and she wasn't, showing any signs of distress, I thought she was okay. I never noticed that she wasn't okay. And so she graduated from high school. She graduated on time. She appeared to be happy. She went off to college. I ended up working at the University of Tennessee, and she ended up going to the University of Tennessee, Chattanooga. So when she left home and went to college, I was like, okay, I don't have to worry about her. We've gotten through the adolescent years. It was some rough spots, but we got through. She's wise, she's smart, she's capable, she's independent. I don't have to worry about her. So my daughter goes off to college and I check in, she says everything's all right. But by that third year, I could tell things were not all right, but she wasn't talking about it. She was never a big talker. She just said she didn't find her way. Like she hadn't found her way in college. Like she hadn't found her group of friends. She hadn't found activities that she necessarily liked. And then she got into a relationship that was not a very good relationship. And I just looked up one day and my daughter was back home. She was back home. She didn't really give me a lot of details as to, did she flunk out? Did she drop out? Like she was a very private person, and she said that she was going to go back, that she just needed to take some time to work and get herself together. So again, me thinking this is the responsible daughter. This is the capable daughter. She's finding her way. She'll be okay. I watched my daughter apply for certain jobs, and she would work a job here, work a job there, and she didn't find her fit with anything. She didn't find her fit with friends in high school. She didn't find her fit at college. She didn't find her fit in a career or on a job. And so I just saw a child that was just kind of floating around trying to find herself. Again, still not being as emotionally in tune as I wish that I would have been. I just thought she had it, that she'd be okay. I thought because I was strong, she was gonna be strong. Because I could overcome certain things, and she saw it, she would overcome certain things. So we get through this experience of her coming home from college prematurely as a junior, trying these different jobs. And one day I'm at work on campus at the university, and she calls me and said, come down to the federal building. And I was like, come down to the federal building. Oh my God, oh my God, what has happened? Is she gotten in trouble? Is it, come down to the federal building for what? I go down to the federal building, and my baby was getting sworn into the Army. Didn't talk to me about it, just decided, this is for the birds, me not having a clear direction. These are her words. I'm ready to get my life started, and I'll use the Army to send me back to school. I'll let them pay for it. I'll become an officer. Like she had a whole plan. And that is the way she communicated with me. Like she had already thought through things by the time it made it to me. And so apprehensive, because I know she didn't like people screaming at her. She didn't like, aggressive people. I'm thinking, how in the world is she going to get through basic training? Because I knew her personality, but and she struggled through basic training, but she did get through basic training, and she ended up being in the airborne unit in the Army, in the Army Reserves. And so she was really proud of that because one, she scored high enough to do that job. And apparently that was a job that you had to score pretty high to be able to get in the job. But with that came some pressures. One, she was one of very few women that was in that unit. And she was also the only woman of color in that unit. So at first, she started to thrive with doing that because it was sort of like a full-time job, even though it was reserves because she was still in training. But over time, it began to start taking its toll on her. And over time, she started struggling with the physical aspect, the PT aspect of it, and didn't know why she was struggling with the running. Unbeknownst to us, we found this out after she died. She had a heart and lung condition that caused her to struggle, but we didn't know this at the time. And so over time, I watched her demeanor change. She began to be withdrawn. She began to be tearful and sad. And at this point, I began to notice that she had some things going on that she just wasn't happy. And I tried to encourage her to go seek counseling. And she said, no, I don't want, can't you see them put me out of the Army if they think that there's something wrong with me? No, I don't want to go to counseling. And I said, well, what about talking to the pastor? And she was like, no offense, Mom, but that's your church. I'm a Christian. I believe in God, but I don't like your the type of service that you like. And I don't necessarily want to talk to the pastor. I just threw different things out there, like, to try to help bring her out of that. And she would appear to get better. And then she became very, very quiet and secretive. And I remember a couple of incidents throughout that time that really stand out to me. First, I was struggling. I had cancer. And so, she had been kind of helping me a lot because I'd had a stem cell transplant. This was like my third bout of cancer. And I thought maybe that was a stressor for her. And I kept trying to reassure her that I was going to be okay. And she would, she was really diligent with making sure I had what I needed in terms of support with dealing with cancer. So I thought that may have been taking a toll on her. But it was just everything. I think it was a cumulative thing of my health, her relationships, not finding her way, struggling in the Army, not really having an outlet. She was a reader and she was to herself and inward. And didn't have a large social network because she didn't really socialize a lot in high school. She didn't really socialize a lot in college. She was kind of isolated just by who she was in the Army. She had a few battle buddies, or I think that's what she called them, but it wasn't like she talked to them every day. And so those couple of weeks before she died, I noticed she was beginning to talk to me more. We talked literally every day. And I found out about my daughter. I learned who she was as a woman. And I think we were beginning to make that transition from parent child to parent adult child. Friends could communicate. And she was beginning to open up and share a little more with me about some traumas that I didn't know she had, that she had been carrying around with her for a majority of her life that I knew nothing about. She talked to me about her relationship with her father that I did not even know she had. I didn't even know that she had formed a relationship with her dad. And she was telling me how, she knows that him and I are not necessarily friendly, but that she gets him and that they have a relationship and that she's okay with him. It's like in hindsight, she was preparing me for things that I didn't know she was preparing me for. And so she got to a point where she was calling in to work a lot, you know, and she also was not a person that did drugs or anything, but she began to start chain smoking cigarettes. She began to go from drinking a glass of wine to drinking several glasses of wine, and it escalated even to marijuana usage. And so I have a younger daughter who has a chronic medical condition that I have to take her in and out of the state for medical treatment. And I remember asking my daughter, what it was that was going to make her feel better. And I remember she was just an avid Harry Potter book reader. Even into her 20s, she was just an avid Harry Potter reader. And I said, well, I have to take your sister to to see about what's going on with her at Nationwide Children's Hospital in Ohio. When I come back, how about we go to Universal Studios? Because they had that Harry Potter land there. Just anything that could, one, keep her talking about future, and two, just to try to get some excitement out of her. And she said, okay, like everything was just real. Okay, yeah, we could do it. And before I left to take my daughter on that trip, my daughter seemed extremely happy. Like just out of the blue, she went from being that sad, kind of depressed person to being a happy person. It was almost like you could see an inner light in her. And one experience, I was telling you, it was a couple of experiences that really stand out to me, was one day I came home from work, and this is right before taking my daughter, to my youngest daughter, to see about her. I came home and she was laying on a blanket in the yard, just looking up at the sky. And I said, "What are you doing out here laying in this grass? I hate bugs." I said, "Bugs in this grass. What are you out here laying in this grass for?" She said, "Just thinking." And she just laid there and just continued to look at the sky. About 2 days after that, again, I saw her. She was happy. She had a glow about her. Unbeknownst to me, she had already made up her mind what she was going to do. And she was relieved. And that's the reason why, the pressure was gone. She was, you could tell she was relieved. I just didn't know why. So I take my daughter to Ohio, and my mother, this is where the tension between me and my mother and me and my daughters, this is where it comes all back into the fold. Me and my mother never ever really recovered from my adolescence in her. We just had a cordial relationship at best. But my children loved her because I didn't discuss my issues with my mom, with my children. I allowed them to have that grandmother, grandchild relationship. She helped me raise them. And so I'm just thinking it's me and her that has the tension, but not her and my children. Unbeknownst to me, my mother resented her helping me while I had cancer. She said, "I helped raise you." This is where the tension comes back. It was just a constant competition between my mother and I, even for my children, and I didn't know it. My mother had been telling her, and I saw this after the fact, after she died, I saw the text messages, that she resented her being with me at my home, helping me, and she didn't help her when she was sick. And my daughter was saying, but mom, because she called her mom, she said, "Mom, my mom has cancer. You had a knee replacement. Y'all are not the same. What, I'm not supposed to take care of my mom. I love you, but I love her too. And I'm going to take care of my mom." So my mom was saying some really ugly things to her. And she called me. At this point, I had left and went to Ohio. She called me and was telling me some of the ugly things that my mother was saying to her. And I told her, "Don't worry about it, that's the mother that I experienced. And I never thought that was going to be the grandmother she experienced, but it's not her. It was my mom's issues." I said, "Don't let her issues and my issues with her become your issues. Just stay out of it." I said, "If the issue is you not being over there, go back over there. I know you can love her and me. The human heart can love many people. Go back over there." And my daughter said, "No, I'm not going to do it, Mom. I'm not going to play into that, and I'm not going over there. So I'm reminding her that we're going to go to Universal Studios and we're going to go to this Harry Potter land, and I'll see her, in a couple of days. And she said, okay. And I call and I check on her, and she would be crying. And I just kept kind of, I was worried. So I'm stuck. I got a child that's home depressed, and I have a child that has some medical needs that I have to take care of her too. And so I'm trying to straddle that fence and trying to hurry up and get back home. I talked to her June the 1st, June the 1st, 2018. I'm talking to her and I'm telling her I'm on my way home. And she's still, upset by some of the things that, my mom had said to her. And she said my mom had given her things in trash bags and told her to get out of her house. And I said, well, listen, if you got to get out, you always got a home. As long as I've got breath, you got a home. You got a home. Don't worry about it. But it hurt her. She was a real sensitive child, and it really, really hurt her. When I came home, I thought my daughter would sleep on the couch. She had taken all of my cancer medicine, all 55 morphine pills she took. And she was laying on that couch dying, and I thought she was asleep. Did not realize until the morning of June the 2nd that my daughter had taken her life. She had taken her life, and she wrote a note that basically said it was no one's fault, that she had been feeling that way for a while, and just please forgive her. And that right there, I had fought cancer 3 times, stage 4 Hodgkin's lymphoma 3 times. Never thought I was going to die from it. But seeing my daughter on that couch, I did not feel like I could live another day. I did not feel like I could live another day. I couldn't even breathe. I felt like I couldn't even breathe. And that experience of knowing her last day was crying about some of the things that was going on with my mom really destroyed any hopes of reconciliation with my mom. I felt a lot of guilt because, again, I wasn't warm and fuzzy, and I parented like I was parented. I felt a lot of guilt. I felt a lot of shame. As a Christian, I had fears because I had been taught that there was no coming back from that there's no salvation from suicide. And so I dealt with that anxiety and that fear. And I dealt with a lot of anger and rage toward my own mother, and a lot of disappointment that my daughter chose that out. And then I also had fear about my 10-year-old, who also was with me when I found her. Now that she's seen this, will she see it as a possible out? So that year, 2018, was absolutely the worst years of my life. And I pretty much thought that I was never going to finish school. I was never going to date. I was never going to be happy again. I never thought I'd smile again after that year. And I guess the story from that point is where we pick up with your podcast of how I got from that version of me to the version of me now. And I would say, one, it was my faith. It was my faith, and it was the people who surrounded me. Cancer was not all bad for me. I left my hometown and went to Houston, Texas, for cancer treatment, and found a whole surrogate family and friends and sorority sisters and classmates from college. Like, I feel like I was given. It wasn't that I created. I was given a village. And that same feeling of pick me up that I had when I was that homeless pregnant girl in Atlanta, I had that same feeling again with the village that came around me when my daughter died. From my realtor, who became a friend, to my sorority sisters who drove down here. They were like the first people here that got to my home before the local people came. And I couldn't stand. And so they lifted me up when I couldn't stand for myself. And one of the key moments after my daughter died. And of course, I could never stay in that house again. I had to find another home. I had to, just life was, I measure life in before my daughter passed away and after my daughter passed away. It was just never the same. But one defining moment was my daughter had been in this program called Project Grad. And it was a program that helped youth go to college at her high school. And unbeknownst to me, my daughter had written a personal statement. And the people, I work with the people collaboratively that had worked with my daughter. So they knew me. And they came to my house and they gave me my daughter's personal statement. And when I read her personal statement, it almost became my mantra. She basically said that she didn't want to just take up space on the earth, that she wanted to make an impact. She wanted to be a therapist. She wanted to help people who had trauma. That she didn't want to. She basically wanted to pay her dues for being in the world, and it was such a hopeful letter, and it spoke so much to the depth of her thinking that I kind of picked up where she hoped to go. So I'd already been working in education, but just in thinking about my daughter's dreams for herself and the fact that she never found her way, and you know it just kind of became my life's work to go back to school. I got into higher ed. I created programming to help young people be successful in college, find their way, and eventually I did finish my PhD. It took a lot. I mean, but I did it with her in the back of my mind. Every time I wanted to quit, every time I wanted to walk away, I thought about my precious daughter, and even my 10-year-old then, which is now 16. I thought about her and the fact that when I didn't even want to get up out of the bed, she said, "Mom, you got to get up because I still need a mom." I thought about her every time I wanted to quit. And so that is the bridge that went from 2018, Kim, to now. I felt like my daughter's death became a driving force. And after her death, I had to practice some self-forgiveness. But even more than that, I had to forgive my mother, because we do the best we can with what we have. And I did the best I could. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't perfect. I did not pay close enough attention to my daughter's mental health, in my opinion. I didn't see things that I felt like I should have saw. And I have to forgive myself. And I have to forgive my mom for missing some things with me as well. So that is kind of the undercurrent of this whole story, is just the tension between moms and daughters, and forgiveness of self and forgiveness of others.
Wow, that's an amazing story of resilience.
Yes.
You and I have been friends on Facebook. I want to say since about around 2018, Kimberly.
Yeah.
And I watched, Facebook gives you a platform to make friends of people you'll never get to meet in person. Maybe you will, maybe you won't, but to see them flourish, to see them go through things, to see things that you'll never get to witness otherwise from people that are across the globe or across the state lines or across the world. And I was there with you, even though I wasn't there physically, every battle you had with cancer. And I watched you do it with grace and so much strength. And you never, as a mother, you never wavered. I see how much you pour into your your daughters that are still here. And I can't believe T is 16. Where did I go?
16 and driving and working and taking college classes.
Where did the time go? I
Just,
cannot believe that.
just flew by.
Um, and you are you embody what we think about when we think about the year she. I told you it's about self-reflection. And I know you've had to do a lot of that as a mother who has lost a child. Healing, you've had to heal from not only, scars from things that have happened to you as a child, but things that happened to you as an adult, and now things that happen to you personally and things that happen to your daughter. And then the transformation is amazing.
I'm so thankful. I'm so thankful because when I was that girl wandering around Atlanta, riding the MARTA into the late hours of the night and sleeping in Grady Hospital, I never saw a future. I never saw a future. And then that day my daughter died, I never thought I'd smile again. And I have been shown that neither is true. And so I'm just thankful. I'm thankful to God keeping me in my right mind. I'm thankful for friends. I'm thankful for my youngest daughter who snapped me out of it. Like she did. She just kind of looked me directly in my eye and said, "This is not fair. I still am here and I need my mother."
Wow.
Yeah. So there was nothing to do but be strong, but I had to have some faith to do it. And I had to lean on a lot of people to do it.
That's amazing. Dr. Brown, do you have any questions?
I don't have any questions, but I just wanted to thank you for sharing your story with us. You are the epitome of what faith is and strength. I mean, I can only imagine being a teenager and being from around this area, riding MARTA as an adult is scary. Being in the city, right, it's scary. It's a scary time. So for you to be able to do that is just a triumph.
I
Sorry.
felt like my steps was ordered throughout that whole experience, from the nurse that took care of me, that realized I was a kid. And I looked like an adult in body, but I was a kid. And when I sat in that hospital, like I wish I could go back and find these people and thank them, but I just feel like they're angels at this point. I had this lady in Grady Hospital where I would go and sit. Remember, I looked together. I didn't look like a homeless person. And I'm sitting in the ER. Sometimes I would sit like I was waiting on family, because I just needed somewhere safe and they had security there. But I'll never forget this nurse said, "Hey, didn't I just see you in here yesterday?" And I was too afraid to say yes. I was stuttering around. And she said, "You were in here yesterday." She said, "How old are you?" I said, 17. She says, "Where's your family?" And I just busted out crying and told her what the situation was. But she basically gave me my prenatal care. She gave me her schedule and told me to come when she was there. And she tested my blood sugar. She always took my blood pressure. And she kept encouraging me to try to go home. She said, "Just go home. Your mother won't say no if you go home." And so it's just those stories. The lady that taught me how to be homeless, a deaf guy that was riding a motor that taught me sign language, the nurse at the hospital, the man from India that just kept telling me, "You're going to learn through this. You're going to learn about yourself and you're going to learn about other people." Those steps were ordered. They had to be.
Most
Mhm.
definitely. So as we wrap up your story, what would you say to others who have gone through similar experiences, especially with grief, about what would you say to them about things that they should reflect upon?
For me, what was I replayed every day of my child's life in my mind, and I evaluated how I parented, what I said, how she ate, the activities I put her in. Like, I judged myself on every day of her life, and I had to get therapy. I had to go get help. So first of all, I want to say there is no shame in getting help, because I don't think I could have gotten through that had I not. But what I learned through going to get help with it was that I have a bird's eye view when I'm reflecting and looking back. And it's easy to critique what you did or what you didn't do or what you should have done versus what you shouldn't have done when it's from a bird's eye view. So that helped me to quit judging myself and just accept the fact that I did the best that I could with the information that I had at the time. And I continue to seek therapy, because, you know, it's not a one and done thing. You still, trauma shows up even in happy times. Sometimes I'll catch myself being happy. I'm about to get married and I'm giddy and I'm happy, and then I'll think about my daughter, and then there are waves of grief that comes along. So I would say to get help, to not judge yourself harshly, because you just got to realize you did the best that you could. I got my pizza. And three, I don't ask why anymore, because there is no answer that would ever be satisfactory to certain questions. So asking why is just more agony. I don't even ask why anymore. I just accept it as what is, take lessons that I learned along the way. And even though it's too late for me to help her, I channel it by helping other young people. I help my youngest daughter. I help students at the university. I help local high school students. I give a scholarship in my daughter's name. That makes this agony and this pain, it gives it a purpose. And when there's a purpose tied to pain, sometimes I think that saves you.
Most definitely. And I thank you so much for sharing your story with others. I have so many friends who have gone through similar situations, and for you to just have the strength to share your story today. As you know, September is Suicide Prevention Month, and I always want to use my platform to educate others about mental health. What would you say to other parents, things that they can do, signs that they may ignore? What are some little tips that you would give to other parents who may be going through similar situation but may not know the brevity of what they're going through at that time?
The signs that I missed was the isolation. My daughter, I thought she just was not a social person, but I noticed that she got more and more antisocial as she got older. So she never did the things that you would think a young lady in high school would do, like go to prom, go to football games. Like, she isolated a lot. She stayed in her room. She kept the door closed. Like, out in hindsight, I wish that I would have made more effort to engage her in conversations, to talk to her about how she was feeling about things, to ask her about stressors. That's something, that isolation thing is not good. And young college age people, I would like to say to parents that they don't need you less, they need you differently. So there's this battle for freedom. They want to be independent. They want to be on their own. They don't necessarily want you up in their business. But that's not the time to have just unmitigated freedom. It is a time to stay connected in a different sort of way, not in a controlling way, but in a so that they know that, one, failures are just opportunities to redo things, because sometimes at that age they think failure is the end. So it needs to be continuous conversations about failure as opportunity. And it's not the end, and there's ways around things, and you can go through the back door if you shut and lock the front door, and just having those types of conversations so that young people can feel like they can redeem themselves. I wish I would have had those conversations as a young person that got kicked out of high school and kicked out of my house because I felt like life was over. So just having those conversations about failure and having conversations about healthy relationships, because my daughter was not in a healthy relationship when she went to college, and I think that served as a lot of her trauma. So isolation, having open dialogue about any and everything, even alcohol and drug use. Like if young people feel like you're going to judge them, they're going to hide things from you. So it's best to have these open dialogues without a lot of judgment, so you can just be aware of what your young people are going through.
Well,
And
thank
even
you.
if they say they don't want help, keep offering it.
Most definitely. I thank you again for sharing your story. I thank you for your strength during this time. I know it can't be easy sharing your story, but I appreciate you sharing it with others so it might shed the light on what others may have questions about that they may not feel comfortable talking about with others. So again, I thank you, Dr. Hill. Thank you so much for coming on our platform, and just thank you for being, for being a survivor, for the transformation, for being that butterfly. The Year of She's symbol is a butterfly, and in that butterfly transformation, it's a journey. And we always tell ladies that at some point, even through the journey may look ugly in the beginning, that caterpillar phase. And there may be times that you need to reset, cocoon yourself, go back into your cocoon and regather yourself. And like you said, your journey before your daughter passed versus your journey after she passed look different. You had to cocoon yourself, reevaluate and reinvent who you are and what you wanted to accomplish in her memory. So thank you so much for sharing that. A lot of people think that once something happens to them, that it's over, and that their life is over. Instead of reevaluating, cocooning yourself, saying, what do I need to do at this time? This is a different part of the journey. And that the journey isn't over. It just looks different.
It just looks different. Yep.
So again, thank you. And just God bless you. Continue to bless you and your daughters.
Thank you. Thank you very much.